I never expected one small moment to completely shift the way I viewed my life, my family, or myself. It all started on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, the kind of day that makes everything feel just a little bit heavier. I was sitting at the kitchen table, head in my hands, bills spread out like a battlefield in front of me. The ceiling had started leaking again, my car needed new brakes, and the company I'd worked for over a decade had just downsized me out of a job. Felt like a failure. My name is Melissa. I'm 42 years old, divorced, and for the past 5 years, I've been raising my teenage stepson, Brandon. His father, Eric, and I got divorced 3 years ago, but Brandon chose to stay with me rather than move across the country with his dad. At the time I was touched, but also overwhelmed. Brandon was 15 then, quiet and stubborn. We were never particularly close, but I loved him like he was my own. Now he was 18, a high school senior with dreams of going into mechanical engineering. He had a part-time job at a garage and spent most of his free time tinkering with engines in our backyard. We shared the house, sure, but we lived like distant roommates, passing each other in the hallway, exchanging a few words at dinner, but never really talking. That's why what happened next shocked me to my core. That afternoon, as I sat surrounded by debt notices and applications for unemployment, Brandon walked in. He paused when he saw me and the mess on the table. Normally, he'd just grab a snack and head back to the garage, but something made him stop. "Are you okay?" he asked. His voice startled me. I looked up, blinking back tears, and forced a smile. "I'm fine. Just dealing with some stuff." He didn't buy it. He pulled out a chair and sat down. "Looks like more than stuff. Want to talk about it?" I was too tired to pretend, so I nodded, and for the first time I opened up. I told him about losing my job, the house repairs I couldn't afford, and the fear that I might not be able to support us much longer. Brandon listened quietly, his expression serious. When I finished, I wiped my eyes and apologized for dumping it all on him. "You've got enough to worry about with school and work. I'll figure something out." Brandon surprised me again. "Maybe I can help." I laughed softly. "Thanks, but I don't think your part-time pay can cover a leaking roof." He didn't smile. "No, I mean, really help." I didn't understand what he meant until the next morning. I woke up to the sound of hammering. I rushed outside to find Brandon on the roof, soaked in sweat, patching the leak himself. I yelled at him to get down, that it wasn't safe, but he just grinned and said, "YouTube tutorials are magic." By the end of the day, the leak was gone. Over the next week, he started tackling other things, fixing the broken dryer, sealing the drafty windows, even replacing the old light fixtures in the hallway. I was amazed and confused. This was a kid who barely talked to me, who used to grumble when I asked him to take out the trash. Now he was walking around with a tool belt like he was on HGTV. One evening, I asked him why he was doing all this. He looked at me and said something I'll never forget. "Because you've always been there for me. You didn't have to let me stay after the divorce. But you did. And I never really said thank you." I felt a lump rise in my throat. For years I'd wondered if I'd done the right thing, if he resented me for not being his real mom. In that moment, all those doubts melted away. Things continued to change. Brandon started helping me budget, showing me apps that tracked expenses and helped cut costs. He even got me connected with someone at his garage who helped me land a temporary admin job. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. We started having dinner together again. Real dinners, not just microwave meals. We'd talk about his school projects, my job interviews, life in general. For the first time, it felt like we were actually a family. But the real turning point came one Saturday afternoon. Brandon had entered a state robotics competition with his school. I offered to drive him and stay for the event, but he insisted he'd be fine. Still, something in me wanted to go, so I showed up anyway, hiding in the back of the auditorium. Watching him on stage, explaining his team's robot with confidence and passion, I felt this swell of pride I didn't know was possible. When they won second place, he looked into the crowd, saw me, and smiled. Not the shy, polite kind, but a big, beaming, grateful smile. On the way home, he told me he'd been accepted into a college program, one that offered a partial scholarship for engineering students. I was over the moon. But I was also scared. How are we going to afford the rest? Yes. Brandon shrugged. I've been saving. And I talked to my boss. He said I can work full-time over the summer. We'll make it work. Something had shifted. Brandon wasn't just helping with repairs anymore. He was stepping up in every way, supporting me emotionally, contributing financially, and most importantly, treating me like a real parent. A few weeks later, I got offered a full-time job at a small publishing company. It was a stable position with benefits, and it gave me hope that maybe things were finally turning around. We celebrated with takeout pizza and soda on the porch, laughing about how we used to barely speak. Brandon joked, "Maybe you're not the worst roommate after all." And I replied, "You're not so bad yourself, kid." But deep down I felt something even bigger. Gratitude. Not just for the help he'd given me, but for the way he changed my perspective. I'd been so focused on everything going wrong that I didn't see the quiet strength growing under my own roof. He wasn't just my stepson anymore. He was my partner, my support system, and my greatest surprise. That summer, before he left for college, we took a road trip together. Just the two of us. We visited national parks, small towns, and laughed more than we had in years. He told me things he'd never shared before. About how he used to feel like an outsider. How he wasn't sure I even wanted him after the divorce. I told him how scared I'd been too, and how proud I was of the man he was becoming. We came back stronger, closer, and more like a family than we'd ever been. Now, a year later, Brandon still calls every week. He asks about my job, gives me updates on his projects, and never forgets to say, "Love you, Mom." Yeah, he calls me Mom now. I never thought those words would come from his mouth. But they did. And every time they do, they remind me how one unexpected act of kindness, one moment of help, can change everything. You might not believe it, but the truth is, sometimes the people we least expect to save us are the ones who end up doing it. And sometimes love doesn't need biology to be real. It just needs effort, patience, and a little unexpected help.